Hi friends, so we are going to be looking at poetry today. And one of the first things we're going to look at are the different forms that a poet can write their poetry. So today I have 4 good examples of different ways that a poet might form his story in his poem. So the first one we're going to look at is called free verse poetry. So free verse poems usually don't have any rhythm, and so they don't really have a good beat to them. They don't have rhyming words, and honestly, they sound a little silly with the way that they're flowing. It kind of just doesn't make sense, and it just doesn't really flow very well. So here's an example of a poem called Seashell. Brown, beige, tan, hard, striped swirl, pointy, bumpy, salty, salty, cool jewel, like a cave, like a castle. Who lives in you? Where are you going? So as you can see, this free verse poem, it didn't have any rhyming words. There was no really rhythm, no beat to it. It also just sounded kind of weird. It didn't really flow well together. However, the poet did a really good job of using really strong words to describe the seashell. So that a free verse poem is a really good way to get your message across with really good vocabulary words, and it doesn't all the time have to rhyme or flow very well. The next example is a narrative poem. So a narrative poem usually tells a story. So the story has like a plot. The poem will have a plot. It will have a beginning, a middle, and an end. The poem usually has characters. There's a setting, and it usually can have a conflict and a resolution. And to remember that, you can think narrative, how like we're working on our personal narrative. So a narrative is telling a story. So narrative poems just tell a story. So here's an example of a narrative poem called Crocodile on the Loose. I went out walking with my crocodile when he slipped out from his collar. I yelled, "Come back," but he just ran and didn't hear me holler. I chased him down the sidewalk and through the playground too. I almost caught him at the slide, but he pulled a switcheroo. Just when I thought I could run no more, he came right back to me. For my crocodile can be a bit crazy, but in the end, he loves me. So this narrative poem, Crocodile on the Loose, it had characters. It had the crocodile. It had a setting. It was at the school, kind of like out on the playground area. Narrative poems can also have rhyming words, like collar and holler, and to and switcheroo. So just remember, narrative poetry, they tell a story with characters, plot, conflict resolution, and settings. The next type of poems, or the next type of form of poetry, is a humorous poem. And that's exactly what it sounds like. We know humorous means funny. So a humorous poem is just a really silly poem. It's funny, and it usually has rhyming words. So this poem right here, I'm going to read real quickly. It says, Wolfman used to fold my clothes. I'll give him one more chance. Last time he wasn't careful and left fur balls in my pants. When my room is nice and neat, I bring them up some food. But Dracula wants to drink my blood. I think that's pretty rude. So as you can see, this was just really silly. They even included a really silly picture. And it's about monsters who are doing the housework. See his little apron that says, I love housework. Talking about, Wolfman, who we know is a werewolf. So when he's folding the clothes, he's leaving fur balls in the pants, and talking about how rude it is of Dracula to even think about drinking their blood. So this poem right here is just a humorous poem. It's just really funny and silly. And it also has rhyming words like chance and pants and food and rude. And the last form of poetry is a lyrical poem. So lyrical poems, they have a lot of rhyming words, and they usually come off like a song, because lyrics are the words in a song. So that's why we get lyrical poetry. So this poem is called Flutter, Flutter, Little Bat, and it actually goes to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. So as I'm reading it, I'm going to read it like a song. So flutter, flutter, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. Swooping through the darkest night, you find your way without a light. Flutter, flutter, little bat, how I wonder where you're at. So it came off like a song, it had a good rhythm, and it had some rhyming words. So that's an example of lyrical poetry. So for the rest of this week, we're actually going to be looking at lots of different poems, and you kind of will get to see an example of each one of these. So free verse, narrative, humorous, and lyrical.